Thank you, Madam Acting President. Madam Acting President, fellow Rotarians and guests, it is indeed a pleasure for me to introduce our guest speaker today. I like to refer to him as the cavalry. The cavalry. You know, as a little boy, I enjoyed those movies, you know, cowboys and Indians, and cavalry and Indians, and every time when it seems as if there was disaster lurking, you know, you hear the horns of trumpets by the cavalry. The cavalry comes and rescues. So I look upon our guest speaker as the cavalry, because if a guest speaker has a difficulty and cannot show up, I can give him a call and our guest speaker will at short notice come and give us some very provocative topics. And so Mr. ALlenJohnson, very appreciative. Our guest speaker is an information communication technologies professional with over 35 years experience with a focus on advising businesses on how best to use information communication technology to meet their business objectives. He is the CEO of Bahamas Digital Solutions, a digital business development and financial consultancy firm whose motto is collaborate, innovate, accelerate. He is here today in his capacity as the Chief Strategy Officer of Sand Dollar Communications, a globally focused Bahamian-owned company that specializes in all aspects of communications consultancy that includes advertising, marketing, customer experience management, public relations, and branding. This company's motto is unlimited potential, immediate results, infinite possibilities. Acting President and immediate past President Carroll, fellow Rotarians and guests, please join me in welcoming to the podium our guest speaker, Mr. C. ALlenJohnson, who will be speaking on the topic, Where to from here? The role Grand Bahama needs to play in the economic recovery of the Bahamian economy. Please welcome him, Mr. C. ALlenJohnson.
Thank you so much once again. It's a pleasure being on. Family and friends, I can tell you guys, family and friends. And it's always an opportunity to speak about the development of my country, the development of the island that I so love, and most importantly, the inspiring and hopefully the motivation of the most important aspect of our country is human capital. The subject. Where to from here? The role Grand Bahama needs to play in the economic recovery of the Bahamian economy. My text will be taken from Numbers 13:33. This is actually a sermon. It's a setup.
Amen, brother.
The reason I use that in particular, it's an expression. They are giants in the land.
Yes, they are.
And the problem is that when you begin to hear, for those of you that understand the biblical story, it is when you have the context where some people lived in a whole state of fear based on what they perceive the external force or the external size of those that's not amongst them. What I'm talking about is the global economy. I'm talking about the United States, China, Japan, Korea, all of those things that affects us locally. But somehow we seem to somehow be afraid to consider or even embrace. I very particularly chose the topic Grand Bahama as a role in the economic recovery of the Bahamas. I would argue, and I put to you to bring me the best of them, and I put to you that there can be no economic recovery in the Bahamas without Grand Bahama. Absolutely none. If you hear MPs, prime ministers, deputy prime ministers, ministers, or any of the pundits, economists that speak to you about the development of the Bahamian economy, and Grand Bahama is not front and center, I actually to dismiss them. How? Just look at the demographics of the country. New Providence, we arguably say, is 80% of the population. Grand Bahama is the second largest community in the Bahamas. when we begin to look on what we consider the unemployment numbers. And I'm one person who don't believe in the 14%, the 10%. I won't even believe in the 5%. Actually, I won't even believe if you tell me 30%, because I don't count part-time employment, I don't count underemployment, and I don't count undercompensation as being employed. For me personally, I consider that just a form of economic slavery, something that seems to be very permanent in the Bahamas. And the reason I say is this: if you look at the job numbers concerning let's use the last 10 years, we have between 40 and 60,000 individuals that enter into the public domain. And oftentimes we talk about those 5,000 individuals that leave school, but we seem to ignore the fact that we have some people, if the numbers are correct, where they say we have a certain amount of people that don't even go to school. They too must fit into the economic picture, the conversation that we have, and the lack of development of the human capital or potential that we have. But when you begin to look at the cap of the amount of people that we just used New Providence and put them at 350,000 and put them at 20%, there's 70,000 individuals on New Providence that you could say is unemployed or underemployed. The question then you must do is look at the layout of New Providence and ask yourself, what economic development, what economic stimulus that you could put on the island of New Providence to bring even 20,000, 30,000 employment in the immediate, utilizing the model of economic development that we currently use. I say none. There's no room for no mega hotel. They're looking at a spot across from the Prime Minister's office to put a semi-medium hotel or boutique hotel. But when we look at the mega hotel development that we seem so accustomed to, there's nothing else left, no place else left in New Providence for any major mega development such as Bahama or such. Now, even if another mega development was to come to New Providence, consider the size and scope of Bahama, and they say they will only at best employ 5,000 people. So what do you do with the other 50,000, 60,000? There's absolutely very little economic potential for the development of New Providence, even though the demographics is there. Which brings us to the point. We begin to look at the demographics across the entire Bahamas and look at the other potential islands that we can utilize, say, to bring forth economic development. I hear individuals have this conversation about Andres. I am still undecided, but I'm somewhat leaning towards that we should preserve Andres as an eco sanctuary. Why? Because in the immediate, we are not prepared to invest the type of technology that's necessary to protect the environment, which makes Andres so valuable to us as a local treasure, as well as from a global perspective. And so until we get to the point that we can put in the digital infrastructure, the technological infrastructure to protect what we have there, such as the water supply, the eco sanctuaries, the fishing nurseries, etc., I think we should move and consider some other options. Where are the other locations? Abaco. Okay? Most of the islands are privately owned. Very little infrastructure, in spite of what we may brag about what the former Prime Minister did. There's very little infrastructure in preparation for what is called business development aspect. There's some infrastructure that's developed in Abaco for basically living, making life a little easier. Roads and lights in the roads and infrastructure into communities are not considered from a global perspective, preparing the city for development. Eleuthera, one straight road. Technologically, they may have the infrastructure on the poles, but there's no preparation. But when you look across the entire archipelago, the only thing left is Grand Bahama. More so, Freeport. And the reason for that is that Freeport was already laid out in its somewhat environment to accommodate from the 50s, 250,000 individuals, where if we consider Freeport alone, we have a population of probably less than 20,000 individuals. And so that gives you the scope that without any improvement, without any 21st century type environment, such as vertical building and the whole new technologies that's evolved since the last 40 years, Freeport, as is, can accommodate another 250,000 people. Now, let's put that in perspective. Singapore is 277 square miles. Freeport is 235 square miles. Grand Bahama is 1,080, 1,000, give or take, a few miles. So essentially, Grand Bahama is about 4 times the size of Singapore that has about 6 million people. And Freeport is just 30 square miles less than Singapore that has 6 million people. And so we have to basically consider that. But why is that? It's because they've utilized global building processes and infrastructure development that allows them to build vertical and develop what we consider now as smart cities. In fact, I hear oftentimes we refer to Singapore. Do you know that 2 days ago in the Singaporean national address, the Prime Minister of Singapore, or President, whatever he is, complained that Singapore, being number 5 in the world, is falling behind? In his national address, he said Singapore is falling behind in its preparation for the global competitive nature. The number 5 nation in the world of 200 says they're falling behind in their preparation for advancement. So it then comes to the whole concept that what is it that we need and how does the role that Grand Bahama play? And even though we may refer to Freeport as being the heart, there is tremendous amount of potential for the whole island of Grand Bahama, because the only thing that restricts us from basically moving forward is an actual strategy for the island that basically used for that basically would encompass Freeport. And I use the word strategy, and I hear people talk about the National Development Plan, and I've said it in the public domain. For me, the National Development Plan represents a book of ideas. It's not a plan. And I challenge them to know. In fact, when I serve as the chairman of the United Democratic Party, leading up to this general election, they had asked myself and Mr. Gregory Moss for our input into the National Development Plan. And it was in its final phase. And it's only when the leader of the party, Mr. Gregory Moss, wrote him a letter concerning the deficiencies, 17 or more major points, and they had to go back. Finished plan. They went back to begin to incorporate those 17 things. And I don't know how far they are. But the mere fact that you spend a year, 2 years, say you have a final product, and then come back just by a simple 2-page letter to recognize the deficiencies. Mind you, they never invited us to come back again to basically put any input. But that's another story, because we are in another dispensation of time. And the time now is for us to become together as a collective, as a collaborative type environment, to begin to shape the direction we want our country to go. I find it insulting when many think that we should depend on 39 individuals in the House of Assembly and 16 in the Senate to begin to shape the direction for a country of 400,000 to go forward to. I am one to believe that the collective intelligence of the people will always exceed the collective intelligence of those we elected. And I think they, being servants, should always be prepared to serve us. And so we should not devoid ourselves, because remember, we are giving them authority back in our behalf. We're not surrendering our power. And it's through us recognizing that we have our power that we can begin to force and move towards making policies and changes that is necessary. Without doing so, you would basically surrender yourself to the position of slavery. And it's a statement that says that governance without consent of the governed is the definition of slavery. And so if we are to allow them to govern without our consent, we have then relegated ourselves to just remaining slaves. And I think that's the problem that we've had over the last 25 plus years in the so-called dispensation. And I used the point, and a lot of people say they've been supposed to be independent for 50 years. I used the point of 25 years, because I used the first 25 years as a period of reconciliation and assessment of us to where we are. But if you go back to 1992, when we so-called had this change, it was also the beginning of what you now call the internet economy. We are now 25 years into what is called the internet economy. In fact, we are less than 3 years to the death of what is now known as the knowledge economy that began in 1992. And we have yet to begin to make preparation for that as we move from what is called the knowledge economy to the digital economy. The digital economy, as a lot of you guys may have heard, is what they consider the Internet of Things and the convergence of where we have the physical world meets the digital world. And as it stands today, it's a $12 trillion economy today. Let me repeat that. Today, it's a $12 trillion economy based on our census in 2015. And we have yet to begin to do that. And we see the fact that we ignore that in our practices. And basically the practices where we simply just continue to adopt the same type of environment, the same type of ideas. One of the most powerful things, I'm going to come to the basis of Grand Bahama, but I just want to lay some things because we have a tendency of repeating things. And this last election, and I hear it, and I do social media listening and listen to the public domain, is concerning the fulfillment of a prophecy of one of our children, one of our former leaders, Dr. Miles Monroe. And Dr. Miles Monroe expressed the fact that in the coming years, you will see new leaders emerge, new faces, new ideas that will blow your mind. The problem we had in the last 2 years since Miles Monroe died is we've had individuals who have announced and pronounced themselves to represent that image. In fact, they would also say right now, because of the new faces in the House of Assembly, it is the fulfillment of that prophecy. I just want you to bring one point in. When Dr. Miles, if you go back and listen to that message, he says there will be new ideas that will not fit into old wineskins. During that prophecy, Dr. Miles never mentioned members of parliament. He never mentioned politicians or any of those things. So the question then becomes, why is it that we have adopted the concept exclusively that these new ideas, these new faces, these new practices will fit into the old wineskins of the political parties and processes we've used in the past? And you begin to see that in the process, and and I tell people all the time, I have a right to critique my government. For me, there is no F&M government. There is my government. And I begin to see the fact that we are going back to the old wineskins, the old ideas, the old people, the old faces. And so you can't have fulfillment of a prophecy of having a new wineskin using old ideas, which brings me to the point of beginning to have our conversation as to how does Grand Bahama play that role. When you begin to look at what Grand Bahama is, then you begin to understand. Very few people understand Grand Bahama except for the nonchalant debate of what the Hawksbill Creek Agreement is, the cancellation of the Hawksbill Creek Agreement, the modifying of the Hawksbill Creek Agreement, even though there is no modification of the Hawksbill Creek Agreement. There are some discussions concerning some tenets of the Hawksbill Agreement that should have fell away that we are having a discussion on. That's a discussion for another day. I've spoken about it previously, that we as a community must eventually have that conversation. And I think that's going to need to come before December, because the resources from that conversation is going to be very necessary in establishing a lot of the things that we intend to do. And we must have a balanced playing ground and a balanced environment. I encourage those of you that have never read the Royal Commission report, that you should read it, and you should pay attention to a part of there in a document called the Ben-Gay Agreement, and begin to understand what it is for those of us that is in the Freeport proper to understand what applies to us. But I want the people within the Bahamas who may listen to this at another time to realize that the Hawksbill Creek Agreement is not an agreement with Grand Bahamians. It is not an agreement with individuals in Freeport. It's an agreement with the citizens of the Bahamas represented by the government, the Grand Bahama Port Authority, and the licensees under that agreement. And the important thing for us to recognize is that it's with the government of the Bahamas that represents every Bahamian. Those in the Guana should have an input, Inagua, Abaco, Bimini, Catkey, from the end, straight up, everyone should have an input as to where do we go to, because it's an actually important aspect of the development of Grand Bahama. I'm going to name maybe about 15 things, and hopefully I see as much as I can get to. What is the possibilities for Grand Bahama? One of the major things that we have to focus on is tourism. And I put to you that Grand Bahama does have the ability to adapt to tourism, but not in the model that we have been using. The problem is we keep referring back to this whole aspect of hotel rooms, and we need to have the natives provide some form of entertainment, keep them busy until they leave again. And hopefully they'll leave enough money for us to survive. Tourism, when combined with the collective, what is called the cultural industry, or what we call the communication industry, makes it one of the largest industries in the world. But hospitality is not in the top 10. And so we keep using it as this whole concept. It is only when you combine it with the entertainment, the film, the cultural, the sports, does tourism become the world #1 service industry. And so, and one of the things that we have to do then is we have to begin to understand it in context, which then becomes to say what? If tourism is to be developed in Grand Bahama, we need to change the model from what we've been speaking of. We need to consider that we don't need another Lucaya. There is a new model that exists called a sharing economy. And you guys hear this, home away, air bed and breakfast, and the likes. It will surprise many people that the first incarnation of the shared economy originated in the Bahamas. And it was the original air bed and breakfast. It's called people to people. We just dropped the ball and never took recognition that an economy was evolving, and we never took the opportunity to digitize it. We still have that opportunity. The Bahamas is within the top 5 or top 10. Bahamas.com is the top 5 or top 10 websites in the world. And so the question then becomes, why would you ignore the potential, the digitalization of your digital platform, Bahamas.com? Because of the reference, whenever you search the Caribbean, you find it. And ignore the potential and say that you will seek out bed and breakfast, Airbnb, or home away, or some one of those. When you can begin to monetize the very website. Because essentially, when you begin to look at tourism, we're saying to the people, why don't you come here, look at the menu, and once you desire what you want to eat, go find yourself a restaurant. That's what we essentially would be doing from a digital perspective. When somebody comes to the Bahamas website or the affiliated website, we should automatically allow them to book and even choose a bed and breakfast, or a boutique hotel, or an experience that is necessary for them to have the complete enjoyment. So if you have a home and bed and breakfast or home away, you automatically lose 10%. The government now is talking about their percentage. So it only makes sense for the government to basically capture those audience and begin to market our own brand, boutique hotels, air bed and breakfast, or whatever name we want to call it, or back to the people and people, and keep that 10% of that multi-million or billion-dollar housing industry. And that's where the whole concept of boutique and air bed and breakfast. And this is why I say the whole concept of building more hotels, for me, don't make sense. I'll put to you that the government, and it takes a little bit more intricate detail of how to have a conversation of the acquisition of the hotel. But for me personally, we have enough empty homes in the Bahamas and enough families in distress that we could very easily set a standard using the so-called promise of a tourism development corporation to set a standard and see where we can move in to fiscally assist those families and basically create the air bed and breakfast type environment. And for those individuals that are homeless or suffering, whatever, it's very easy when you say individuals won't qualify for a home. Is that if you put them in a house where we develop an environment of tourism, and they could rent their house for 10 days a month, you can very easily see that as an income they never would have possessed, allowing them to afford their home. And we say that the economy does not allow them right now of the minimum wages. And so we can then move away from the concept of low-income homes. And I want you guys to pay attention to the concept of low-income homes. Do you know what a low-income home requires? The first thing, it requires you to have low income. Wow, we should be building affordable homes. Not low income. We should be building affordable homes because we have an expectation that our Bahamians, income will increase. But when you come back to the tourism product, we have the boutique hotels to accommodate them. But at the same time, we have the unique ability to develop what is called a boating industry, where individuals from, whether it be from yachts or coming here for boating events and boat races or whatever it is, can come to the island. We are 60 miles away from the United States that allow, whether it be whatever functions we have, whatever events that we have, people almost have it. I mean, there's enough people in the boating industry, there's another multi-billion, almost trillion-dollar industry in South Florida and around, and we can have a boating event almost every single week. That far supersedes what we do here once a year and call it regatta, with all due respect, But we also have the aspect of something called cultural tourism. And cultural tourism is not simply finding old buildings and saying this is where such and such person live and such a person live. We have some historic aspects of evolution as citizens on this island that we can begin to tell the story or even begin to recreate the environment for individuals to experience, going all the way back to the Indians, going all the way through the transition, and all the way to pirates. And a lot of people believe that it's actually just newcomers. Grand Bahama played an integral role in the piracy, and the gun running, and the rum running, and all those different aspects. It's just that we never truly told our story. And for some reason, we believe that Grand Bahama began with the Hawks Peak Agreement. And it did not. It did not. We also have an excellent opportunity for ecotourism. If we begin to reserve that which we have the bird watching, we have some eco reserve with the mangroves. There is billions of dollars available in the eco type environment globally when we begin to restore the environment that has been damaged by the practices that we've allowed around Bahama in the name of economic development. And so essentially what it is that we have to take an opportunity to assess where we are and where we want to go so we can create what's called best practices to doing it. One of the greatest aspects also now is the fact it's called content development. And people refer to it, and I hear my Prime Minister and I hear the Minister of Tourism always we talk about big budget films. Big budget films are now called YouTube. Big budget of $5,000, $10,000, and $100,000. And so we have to move towards developing what's called a content environment where we get our films and have our young people develop content and help them move to create an environment for individuals to come to Grand Bahama. And we have what's called soundstage, green screens allow you to do a whole lot of things and blue screens and whatever else. And so yes, we can adopt what's called the film aspect. And so we just basically have to rethink the tourism product as we do it, decide what is it that we want to bring in here besides sunshine and sea, and begin to say, what could we offer? How could we do it? Which is going to bring me back to the whole concept of financing. The next aspect I want to move to something called sports. I'm not talking about necessarily sports tourism. Yes, we can build the arena, but before we get to build the arena, we always say we don't have the resources. I don't know exactly how much football teams there are, basketball team, I'm not a hockey team, I'm not a sport enthusiast. But very easily in the Bahamas, we have almost every year sort of sunshine and sea and whatever else. Why don't we consider engaging those sports franchises that's in the North, Midwest, and whatever, and invite them as a training environment here in the Bahamas for their off-season training, where they will build the stadiums, where they will build the environment, whether it be the baseball stadium, the basketball stadium, or even indoor hockey stadiums. They will build it as a means for which they will develop and do their spring training. They have the privacy and protection, but at the same time, they will create as an environment that we have use all year round, whether it be for events and staging and tracking, whatever it is. But what they want is, in their environment, they have the snow, they have the blizzard, they have the cold. We can give them the perfect environment for sports training. We can then begin to have offshoot of sports camp, which brings us to an aspect of what's called education. Because sports education requires an involvement and immersion. You don't just wake up and become a tennis star. You don't just wake up and become a baseball star. You don't wake up and become a basketball star. You have an environment where you have an education facilities that's actually built on Grand Bahama that allow world-class trading facilities that can be tied into these things to be built on Grand Bahama. And it's only a matter of deciding how you want to go about it. The first thing that we have to also consider, I want to go into the next thing, so I don't want to take time for each of those. I kind of touch on the cultural aspect of what it is, of culture on Grand Bahama, whether we have an indigenous for the Bahamas as well as incorporate some things from the Caribbean. The most important aspect is that this thing will be called industrial, that we have not tapped the full potential of. And why is that? You consider the Bow Park and former gas Bacardi's that we had here, and the Pharmachem and the Bahamas as the hub of industry. But here it is that you have the most prepared industrial plateau in the Caribbean. You can probably count in 1-5 companies that probably collectively employ less than 2,000 people. And the action, why? Why is it that we have the third largest harbor, one of the 3 largest harbors in the world? In case you don't know, the Grand Bahama Harbor is one of 3 harbors in the world. Only 3 harbors in the world can host post-Panamax ship. A post-Panamax ship is a ship is too large to go through the Panama Canal. So they come here to Grand Bahama or one of these other ports and offload it to smaller ships so they can make it through the Panama Canal. We have one of only 3 in the world. Why is it not being utilized? Not just for that particular company, because we can have multiple companies having access to the harbor as well as our ports. We have some of the deepest water in the world. And technology now allows us to embrace and tap the industry. And the reason I'm talking about this industry is that we also have, I think, one of the 3rd largest or longest airport in the region also, here in Freeport, East Grand Bahama, that is yet to be touched, yet to be developed. That has meant what is called military grade. The airport in East Grand Bahama was designed in case of emergencies, that is space shuttle that actually land there. In fact, if you remember Noriega, not Noriega, the Oliver North, the gun running and everything, some of that happened right at that airport. And so it's just understanding what do we have in our possession. So here it is that you have a world-class harbor, a potentially world-class airport that we don't use to encourage industry to come in. What is the purpose of industry? Industry wants to develop products and things and then ship it into the global marketplace. Why do they go to the Midwest or some other country that they have to use these smaller ships, it's a smaller environment, and then barge it or take it out to get it there? We have a one-stop shop, production, onto the ship, onto the plane, wherever it has to go, and drop it off. You know, there's some reasons, personal reasons, I believe that these have not happened over the last 20 years, taking into the fact that I personally believe that Hutchinson Power knows, and the Grand Bahama Port Authority is actually ignorant of this, and it's a cure for ignorance or information, or they don't know what to do. And so what we have to do as individuals have to begin to know, we have to begin to deposit these into the particular environment and ask, why is it that we don't develop these? I'm going to make a little side note concerning investments in the Bahamas. And it kind of triggered when I mentioned the Port Authority, Hutchinson and my government. You know, for the last 15 years, I hear the Port Authority brag about attending trade shows. You know, if I had a product and the CEO of the company, I would send my employees to the trade show to present the product to other people that are looking for purchasing, not necessarily for buying into my company or my environment. The individuals that you meet at trade shows, chances are they'll never, ever, ever, ever even see the inside of the corporate office of Microsoft, Dell, Samsung, or any of those. Nor will you find the CFO, CEO, the strategy officer, anything of those sort. My Prime Minister, Thomas, and now sits as one of 200 leaders in the world, or countries. I can pick up the phone and call Microsoft and say to him, the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas is on the phone. And he answers the phone and he say, hey Bill, how you doing? It's me, Hubert. I understand my team up there to talk to your team, because I think we have some unique opportunities and I think you should consider it, considering that we have influence on the global economy and where we sit geopolitically. as well as our participation in these global organizations. And so we then now having a discussion at a whole higher level as to how can the Bahamas benefit. But trade shows and those type of events, if I invent a new pencil, I go to a trade show to sell it to buyers, not to decision makers. And so we need to rethink on how we present ourselves in that environment. And so when we begin to look at all of the industries that are developing, more so the global industry, the digital industries, which I'll come back to further down, we have to begin to present ourselves as the perfect location. There's no other country in the world that has the Hawks-Picking Agreement. Forget the noise about the little things that we have a debate on, whether we should extend or not extend. Again, that's not the Hawks-Picking Agreement. But the Hawks-Picking Agreement, if properly utilized, is one of the most beautiful documents in the world. We have the Deepwater Harbor, and we have the Freeport, and we have the geopolitical location to one of the most strongest economies in the world, the United States. We can almost send dinghies there with our products and services to service them. We might even have some young people develop a slingshot and something to catch it in Miami. But that's how close we are. You know, we have people developing places in China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, all of these places that has full access to the eastern seaboard. We don't. Which brings us to the whole another concept that we have is called maritime. You know, we used to be the third maritime registry. I don't know what we are now. It's funny that we have one of the best locations, some of the best protection, one of the most valuable flag and passport in the world. You know, the Bahamas passport is, I think, rated number 3 in the world. 200 countries, we rated number 3. Passport. That means our flag. Our passport and our flag are one and the same. Brings that same sort, should bring that same sort of authority. And so ships should be seeking us out to register themselves as part of our maritime type environment, as well as that we have access to the Deepwater Harbor that allows us to provide servicing to those into the maritime authority, environment like no other country in the world. You know, Cuba's trying to build a harbor right now, I think the Dominican Republic. They've been at it for 5, 10, 15 years trying to meet and match our requirements that God has so gracefully given us. You know, we are also the gateway, passage. I think what they say 60, 70, 80% I think of all cargo ships pass through the Bahamas. And we have no benefit from it, not from their passage or from the economic opportunities. So how do one of these ships pass through and you don't have a viable maritime type environment? It is something that we have to begin to rethink and look at the Bahama Island and the other islands as a whole, not just as a registry, but even for smaller yachts, that we begin to register them and they begin to make this their home hub. We have the airport and we have the harbor. And so even for those individuals that don't want to go, why not just bring your boat here and would you have what's called yacht condos? One of the biggest industries in the maritime industry is called yacht condos. A lot of us may consider that some people use their yacht every year. They have the liberty of buying $5, $10, $15 million and spending on the yacht. And they use once a month. They need a garage. They need a parking. We have the most ideal environment, yacht condos, that we can create. And that's just the same thing that you have the foreigners come in and tell us they're going to build us some marinas. We'll be very blessed with some jobs for a short period of time, and we'll have whatever particular skill set. Another point that we have is something called the second home market, and it ties into, I want to talk about the second home market and medical tourism. Around the world, individuals are looking every single month, a minimum of 10,000 middle-class individuals retire in the United States. I think it's weekly, but I'm used to the title of the month. 10,000 families that looks to go to Panama, Peru, wherever else other than the United States. Grand Bahama then becomes an ideal environment for second home ownership. And we're not talking about where second home ownership where we give away citizenship, etc. These individuals just looking for a place to retire. You have another multi-billion-dollar industry in the U.S. It's called senior living. And senior living is where seniors are looking for somewhere they can just golf, play tennis, go to the beach, some bocce, I think it is, or whatever sport it is, have a place of movies, theaters, and a cultural experience. They just want to spend the rest of their lives. And so it's a unique opportunity to make the Bahamas a place for senior living. Tethered to that, and essentially what they want is an environment for hospitals and things that we have to definitely build the infrastructure for air out of here. But in that, we also have something called assisted living. And we always talk about so-called medical tourism. Assisted living is where individuals are moving into even further in their senior year or suffering from some type of illness, where you basically may even have a whole community, or where they live by themselves or somebody live with them, or you have a community where it's centralized, there is doctors, nurses, whatever that checks on them on a regular basis, or assist them going to the beach or experiencing their end of life. That's a multi-billion-dollar industry. There are companies on the stock exchange, the U.S. stock exchange, that are listed as part of that assisted living environment. And this is where they're stealing our nurses. Classes we begin to certify them. They take them there and make billions of dollars off them, and they get to send a couple of dollars home to assist their families. And so when we begin to look at what is called the medical aspect, and we talk about this hospital environment, and, and one of the things that we have not yet recognized, and I'm talking about these things, these are not necessarily government initiatives, but 100% they require government buy-in. Government creates the environment. Government creates the laws. Government creates the platform. I hear the pundits and former politicians who've been there for 10 and 15 years that have been there and basically took the position of one telling what to do now. And I said to them, if you knew then, we would not be having this conversation now. You have this whole concept again when we talk about the harbor, transshipment, air and sea. We don't necessarily have the land. But in the same aspect, we had Amazon that just went to Opa-locka. There's a high possibility being checked that there's a Panamax ship that will come into our harbor, unload some smaller containers, take thousands of containers to Opa-locka, and they will sort them in Amazon environment where they have 1,000 to 10,000 jobs eventually. They will then sort them into goods that's going to the US and goods that's going to the Caribbean and South America. The goods that's going to the Caribbean and South America will put back on the ship, and the ship will come back here to Freeport. To send them out. And we can have that done here. But we have to have the foresight to ask, why are they taking it in and shipping it back to ship someplace else when the product is right here? And you have arbitration. We could have this thing called arbitration, and you have this thing called fintech. We talk about the financial service industry. And you hear people talking, and again, I want to refer, and this was part of a platform that many talked about of the United Democratic Party, was a fintech environment and a reg tech environment. These are 21st century ideas where you abandon the concept of services as you are and banks as you know it going to tell us everything now is in cyberspace. We can become the digital platform here on Grand Bahama. We have the fiber, we have the directive of it to bring it here, which brings to the promise made by this incoming government that they'll make a digital Grand Bahama. I'm going to quickly move there because time is moving. And what is the digital Grand Bahama promise? It is the fintechs that allows you, and I guess one day they'll invite Mr. Morris back to explain this more in detail, but creating depositories for KYC, know your clients, where we create the databases for fintech, where we do the verification, authentication, rather than individually having them each done by lawyers or banks or whatever. And essentially, we become the depository for the CIA, NIA, Scotland Yard, or whoever it is that want to blacklist us. And we become the digital depository for those information that we verify first for the Bahamas, then for the Caribbean, and then for the world. But it's the same thing in the background operations. If you research fintech or reg tech is where you create a regulatory background where every single bank in the world want to run to your jurisdiction and have a presence. And in their presence here, it creates an environment where you need to develop your skill set to put those individuals in play. This gaming, I suspect that we have in place, that's a whole other show concerning gaming, because there's no such thing as spinning, and there's no such thing as numbers, not in the digital world. Spinning is called digital casinos, and numbers is called lottery. You just come up with another name, so we can come up with a makeshift law accommodate a small group of people as opposed to embracing what's called a digital platform. At any given time, last year, the take in the digital gaming, 1.6 billion people gamble or game, as you call it, and the take was $438 billion. And that simple is very simple. We're an integrated environment or even a platform. And this is not about Bahamians gaming. This is about Bahamians owning. Everything I speak about is about us moving into what's called an ownership mindset. That is promised, which is a 21st century environment. And then you have what's called data management. And the world, data is the new currency. Every time you speak, every time you post on Facebook, every time you post everywhere, information is the new currency. And so we have the unique potential of becoming the digital Silicon Valley as promised. But it requires not people who speak to the future, it requires individuals that stand in the future. The future is not something where you move forward to. The future is something we look back on. And the problem is we have individuals that hear things and they can repeat it and they say, we're going to do this and we're going to do whatever. And you go to them and say, how? And this is the point that we need to begin to ask them. It is so well and good that they will say what they will do, but we never ask them how. And we have to begin to ask them how. And the reason I say that is there is individuals amongst us in the Bahamas and Bahamians around in our diaspora that not only have been involved with this, but have created the environment in which the world went on, that will be more than willing to come home and develop their country. And they're not asking for a job, like everybody say. We don't have any jobs for them. They don't want to come home and be just overworked suckers in a just overworked system. They want to come home to an environment that I just spoke about an environment that the government creates, the plateau for which they become and dominate from their own home, and have the preferred treatment of actually being a Bahamian. And the problem is that we keep looking externally to develop us internally. And the change that we need is not only must come from us, I put to you that the change we need is already in us. And we must start looking to, I call them the 5-year celebrities. Because, a lot of us, with all due respect, and we talk about those individuals that we send to Parliament. Collectively, many of us without the title would not give them the opportunity to run your own business. For some reason, we believe that when we give them a title, that they become competent. And many of them are extremely competent, but there's many amongst them that may be practicing at the level where their ambition may be greater than their abilities. But it requires us as a nation that sets the path. Because the beauty about leadership is that, I use the expression that they become managers of our economy. And I think leadership should come from outside of the economies that shape. Look at the council that Donald Trump had. But they directed the policy because they understand the future. We don't believe that Donald Trump knows the future. So he came in and said, collective mind. Which in ending up, let me sum it up and say this. What Donald Trump and other great leaders have done is adopt what's called a Solomon complex. And we have the expression that Solomon was the wisest man ever lived. And the historical records will show the reason why Solomon was the wisest man ever lived was because of the steps he took. Let's discover what wisdom is. Information, when provided to you, you get to say, I know. Information, when properly comprehended, is called knowledge. Knowledge, when properly executed, there's a lot of people that know stuff. Knowledge, when properly executed, is wisdom. And Solomon was the wisest man. Why? Because what Solomon did was, whenever he was faced with a problem, he called all of his wise men. He even called a court jester. Because he simply said, you know what, I have 5 decisions. Let's ask the court jester, what would you do? And he said, I do number 5. Solomon says, okay, thank you so much. Number 5 is off the list. Okay, now what you're going to do for these other 4? And so you learn from all of them. And so he became the collective intelligence of his nation. And that is what wisdom is. And that's how you represent it, the so-called wisdom of the ages, the wisest man ever lived. And I say to you, and in ending and winding up, that if we want to develop these so-called concepts that we So many of our youth talk about a smart community, smart cities, and smart island. We have the ability right here on this island, and every intelligentsia that we need to develop Grand Bahama is on Grand Bahama. Not even counting those that already left us. We can invite them back. And so when we start talking about Bainstown, Grandstown, and Senegal, it's a whole other story because those areas have been declared uninhabitable in the 80s. We need to create an environment where those 60,000 to 70,000 people can find a place to work in the Bahamas. They can come here and buy homes. They can come here and consume. And there's a place for those that just want jobs. But there has to be a place for those of us that want ownership. Thank you so much. Questions if I get a minute?
Mr. Johnson, all the opportunities, all the wealth, and all the impact that we could have on an international basis, which you described, how is your work? How is it that, how can we approach our leaders for them to look into various areas that, for example, that you outlined, for them to utilize so that the Bahamas can move from third world status to where we want to go in first world status?
Well, we took the first step today, and that's listening. The next step is for us to come together, even in our ignorance, to cure the ignorance and develop a blueprint of what we want. There's a powerful statement that says, you must know where you are to know where you want to go. If you call for reservations and the lady asks you where you want to go, and you say New York, and she said where you want to depart from, I don't know, she can't give you reservations. If you make another call, and this time you say, hey, I'm in Grand Bahama, I want to take a vacation, they say where you want to go, I don't know. So at any given time, you must know exactly where you are and where you want to go to fall apart. So what we have to do is we have to come together as a community, as businessmen, as community, not just businessmen, but as a community, and form the ideas and the direction. First assess where we are as an island, where we are as Freeport, where we sit in the Bahamas, and where do we want to fit into the Caribbean and from the global perspective based on the tools that we have access to. But it requires us to begin to have not just random talks like this. It requires us to come together and have sincere, concentrated directives as to where we want to go. The intelligentsia that's needed is not in the office of the Prime Minister. If it was, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Us requires us to come together as a collective. The information is there. I know a little bit.
But the question is, how do we do that?
Well, no, by coming together and using intelligentsia. Like, we could have.
No, what I'm saying is, how do we persuade our leaders?
Because what we said to them is,
to come to do what you're saying.
because what we have to do is we have to come together and develop the plan. They're not going to do it. I'm saying this. If I want, and I'm working on the digital Grand Bahama, not just myself, but getting inputs from individuals within the technology here in the Bahamas and around the world to present it to the people, to have them buy in, to then present it to the government. Because with all due respect, I believe that if I present my plan like I've done for the last 14 years to government, it will just end up in some shelf. So we have to have buy-in. And so essentially, the human capital development regime, where an individual such as yourself that understands the level of service that we need and understands the whole aspect of learning and training, that we begin to identify what are the skill set we need, and then how a group of you guys from human capital development develop a training regime so that when we go to Amazon, or let's go, when we go to Dell, Dell has a three-tiered service. You go to India, and the Indians can't answer your phone, it's escalated to Costa Rica, and they can't answer your phone, then it's escalated back to the United States. In India, $5, Costa Rica, $10, the United States, $40, and they even have a talk tier about that. Why is it that we can't intercept the $40 an hour calls? But the question is, where do we get the individuals? That's where we put together the human development capital that make a competency of IC33, which is called Internet Core Competency Certification, where those individuals become certified. So when we go to Dell, we go to whatever, we can say, we have 1,000 people who we could start right away. Because these are things that take less than a year. These are not college degrees. These are certifications that take 6 months to a year and become completely certified in it. And so we as a people have to then demand. And then for those of you that don't know, what you have to do is go to government, go to the office of the Prime Minister and say, I heard a nice speech. I heard Mr. Johnson speak with his new digital Bahamas. I don't want you to prove that what could be done. I need you to prove what they say cannot be done. Just encourage them. Tell them to just prove what he says is possible digitally can't be done. And let them present their paper as to why it won't be done. You know why? Because for them to present their paper why it can't be done, they'd have to engage me as to why it could be done. And I can bring them up for you. But those of us that have a particular skill set, we have to have a conversation and come together. I really understand the training that is necessary in the processes, but I don't know how a school runs. I mean, digitally I can tell you the concept, and I'll just give everybody a computer and play the tape over and over until they get it. But there's some humanistic environment that needs to be engaged that schools that requires, and those of you in that training industry, many of you have various different disciplines, you know, like Mr. Morse has law. I can tell you that I would love to see the digital structure. I don't understand Bahamian law, Commonwealth law, how it interacts with US law, how to set up the fintech based on the legal aspect, how to set up the whole aspect of having the Bahamas become a digital law jurisdiction. So it requires him, me, and somebody else to come together. So none of us individually have all of the answers. But collectively, I think if we have the discussion and iron it out, where you keep asking your questions and I keep asking your questions until we all understand that we can actually come up with a master plan that is necessary.
Thank you. There is some good news on the horizon. You made a statement earlier about we don't interact with the upper management. In fact, next month, we have someone from Grand Bahama who is going over to discuss with Elon Musk several topics. We have a Bahamian who saw opportunities and actually went to BlackRock headquarters and sat there until someone spoke to him, and now he is connected to BlackRock. We have young people, and I think we have a tie, but I'll give you $1 on the bet. It is our intellectual capital that we have to develop, and we have to find ways to make that happen. That's not just going to happen on its own. The playing field on the government side is becoming level. They're now looking at, as Peter said to me, we're not out there looking for jobs anymore. We're looking for entrepreneurs to create jobs, and they are setting up systems to make that change. So I see a lot of opportunities on the horizon, and I see our people. We've put probably hundreds of millions of worth of intellectual capital out there in the world. Now it's our time to bring them back, and we have to set up mechanisms to make that happen. And after the meeting, I'll talk to you about
I was going to say that you may have more information I have, but see, the whole concept of planting a garden is like if you have a secret garden, the important word is not the fact that you have a garden. The most important word is the word secret. And the thing about national development doesn't involve the few. It involves the all in the public domain for which you can critique and involve. That's why they came into what's called public service instead of private. I'm extremely excited concerning the individuals that is going there. But there's a whole lot of things that we need to have conversation. And I would put to you that this idea would be excellent in the technology center they're building in Florida. But in Grand Bahama, I would love for them, for the mayor or the government, to tell me how we will create an environment for which we can have technology hubs in the Bahamas. Because the technology is 90% electricity. And unless we change the model that we have, where we begin to say, how do we generate electricity for businesses? Most of your house mortgages and business payments is electricity. And so this is where we have the whole conversation. What is the government policy? What is the plan? And so it isn't a matter of developing human capital. I think we already have it. It's a matter now of us harnessing it. Because You might believe it, most of our children are person didn't learn in school. And so there's most likely hundreds of thousands of him in the Bahama community.
They are.
Thank you so much, Mr.
I have a question.
You have a question?
Real quick.
Okay,
Make sure we talk a lot about new business opening and prospect of new investment coming in. How do these businesses and new investors survive an economy where the cost of living is so high? One. And then two, we're signing on to WTO. How does local businesses survive under WTO?
I think we need to have a conversation with the WTO. The WTO as we know it, no longer exists. No longer do you have people coming in. It's now time for us to abandon the model of entering WTO and begin to conquer from here outside using the intellectual capital. If any of your MPs or anything today interested in signing WTO, just remind them in 2023 you will have we put a team of people there who's going to unsign it. And as far as business is concerned, no matter how many small businesses you start in Bahama and in the Bahamas, they will all fail because there's only a certain amount of capital or cap in the Bahamas. And if I open up a restaurant, that only means that my restaurant is successful, I must be killing another restaurant. Until there is new money in the knowledge economy and the digital economy, and beginning to tap into our natural resources, which is the primary sector. There's no global economy without a raw resource economy. Until we begin to tap into those to bring new revenue to the Bahamas, all it is I start a business that will cannibalize yours. And that's why we see businesses open every day. Remember the bazaar was filled then downtown died. And then the people in the bazaar died. Now we get two dead people. We absolutely need new money into the economy. And that's the type of ideas we need to have a conversation. How do we bring new revenue into the Bahamas? And it's not going to be using the old methods. It has to require new thinking and new engagements. Thank you once again for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson, for sharing all the knowledge and information. I now call Leonard to the line.
I want to thank you very much. And Jared, just give me a second. And Mr. Johnson, you know, there's a new printing company that just opened up. And I said almost the exact words. It meant the same thing last night when I saw the advertisement. You know, we have so many printing companies in Freeport now. Like you said, someone's going to die. Okay, but anyway, your information imparted to us this afternoon, it was so much information that I was beginning to become overwhelmed because every time I hit on something, you said something, I hit on it, you ordered something else. My suggestion would be that these topics be put into a forum whereby we can concentrate on one or two and go in depth in them, because you were just hitting the surfaces, you see, which is a good thing. But I mean, you gave us a food for thought this afternoon. I'm telling you, I am overwhelmed by all of this information. What we need to do is now start putting this information in the areas where we can work and get to the bottom of it and develop one or two of them. So on behalf of our club,